that's not a new theory. That's, you know, psychologists have been saying that for a long time. But in Matei's theory, this happens even more reliably and more often if a woman doesn't know what those dreams were. And that somehow subconsciously we will pick up, and it's good to say this right around Mother's Day, and do for our mothers give them the things they didn't have by getting them ourselves. I think, you know, even if they had 90% of the things they wanted in their lives, we somehow know what they didn't have and try to become that for them. I know it's interesting. I lost my mother a couple of years ago when The Lace Reader came out, but just before she died, she said, you know, I always wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to live in New York City. And I thought, I had no idea. I mean, she'd been an artist. She'd been a commercial artist. And I thought she was artistic, but I had no idea that she wanted to write. So, and since then, going through some of her things, I found some of her writing. So I picked this up whether I knew it or not. I think it was my choice, maybe, maybe not. But Z, of course, her mother's life was cut short. And since Maureen wanted the great love, one of the maps she gave her daughter was this, and it's very common, I think. It's a common thing to want, both men and women. But in Z's case, the map she's been given by both her mother and her father, and herself in her kind of abruptly ended early childhood, are flawed, and she has to start again, as I said. She really needs to go forward, and that's the same theme that occurred in The Lace Reader, so it's probably my theme. I came back here to write my books, so there's a certain truth to that for me. They say writers always write the same thing, sort of. It's a very different book, but I think that is something it has in common. What do you do when the map you've always relied upon fails you? How do you find your way home? And what is home for you, and what is family? And those are the questions that Z is trying to answer in this book. I'm going to tell you the last part of the book, and we're going to end on a high note so you don't think this is all very sad, because it really isn't. The image system for the book is celestial navigation, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We are moving so fast, but the stars are constant. You know, the Earth is spinning, but they're not. And, of course, going back to Old Salem and to Bowditch and to a present-day story with a character named Hawk, we deal with celestial navigation. Hawk grew up in Marblehead, almost directly across the harbor, Salem Harbor, from Z. But they never knew each other. And they've both been affected by the death of Lily Braden, who was Z's patient, though they don't know that either at the beginning of the book. When Z meets him, he is a rigger on the Friendship, which is a recreation of an old, I think 171-foot East Indiaman tall ship that sailed out of Salem Harbor. If you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing. It's wonderful. And he's one of they have two riggers there, and in this book, my book, they have more, and he's one of them. He was trained in celestial navigation in England, but he came back here, and of course there isn't much call for that. So he's a rigger and a carpenter. But he teaches celestial navigation courses on the side. And when Z meets him, she actually hires him to put in railings for her dad, and they meet this way. He is, this is funny, same as a writer, if there are other writers, you'll know, sometimes you go to great lengths to describe a character. I don't do too much of description of characters because I usually let my readers do it. But I agonized over the description of Hawk for quite a while. And I ended up throwing it out and saying something that affects everyone and everyone understands. He looks like George Clooney. So he's teaching a celestial navigation class. And because he looks like George Clooney, it's all women who are taking his class. And in this case, it's a group they call the Yacht Club Cougars, who are from Marblehead and come to Salem to take the class. And he's being teased unmercifully by all the other people that work on the ship. And because he's been talked into taking them out on his boat, because you can't sail the Friendship with, they've had the class on the Friendship for some time, but they can't sail it yet. This summer we hope they will be able to take it out with groups of people. They take it out occasionally. It's a flagship, you know, it goes up and down the coast for historic festivals and things, but people haven't been able to travel in it yet. So they've talked Hawk into taking the Yacht Club Cougars out in his boat this particular night for a class that's entitled Rocking Your Sextant. So this is what I'll read you, and this is a little funnier than what I read you before. We'll end on this. And of course, people are giving him a very hard time about doing this. If I can't find it. rocking the sextant. Hawk arranged to take the class out on his boat, a 1941 Sim Davis lobster boat, a 40-footer, with a winch and gear removed, which Hawk had spent last summer restoring and was now living on just a few slips down from the Friendship. In Hawk's opinion, there are 2 times a day when it is best to take sights, dawn and dusk. Twilight sights are taken just before the horizon disappears into either darkness or light, in those few minutes when the planets and locator stars are still visible. It's a moment in time, and it takes practice. For the beginner especially, it would be important to get to a spot where Hawk knew that the stars would be visible along the horizon, which meant they had to get away from shore. They left an hour before sunset in order to make it to open ocean. It was a relatively calm evening, and the boat was sturdy, so they wouldn't have to deal with much chop. This was both good and bad. The sextant was a durable instrument meant to take vertical angles from a moving ship. One of the reasons for going out was that the students would get used to the movement of the boat and accustomed to taking readings in any conditions. The women arrived early with picnic gear and bottles of wine. "I hope you also brought your notebook and sextants," he said when he saw the bottles sticking out from their L.L. Bean canvas bags. They headed out, passing the tiny lighthouse on Winter Island, and then Salem Willows Park with its long wharf lined with men fishing for stripers. When Hawk passed the confines of Salem Harbor, he gunned the engine, heading between the Miseries and Children's Island, and as straight out to sea as was possible in the sheltered waters that ran between Salem and Cape Ann. "Where are we going?" one of the cougars finally asked. "We have to get past land by twilight," he said. They sat quietly in the stern. He finally stopped the boat at a spot he knew well, where the chop wasn't too bad. Behind them, fading into the distance, was the entire North Shore, and to the south, the vague outline of the Boston skyline. But straight ahead, if you didn't look back, was a clear horizon.